You've been of enormous help to me in this project, and you probably don't even realize it, because you gave me such encouraging words 20 years ago. I mean, you told me you don't publish books like it, but you gave me encouraging words, and I had the portraits all laid out on your countertop, and then 20 years later, you invited me to be at your table at the Festival of Faiths, and now you're on the board, and you either said something nice or you didn't say something mean when they asked me to display the work in the gallery. So thank you.
Well,
and thank you for your work in the world.
well, you know, we're all doing what we've been given to do. And the type of person I am is, we all want peace in the world, but I have a particular drive for reconciliation and peace, and it took the form in my life of world religions, because I've traveled a great deal and majored in Hinduism at Sarah Lawrence under Joseph Campbell, been involved in Tibet with Buddhism and His Holiness, lived in Egypt, speak some Arabic, like been in practically every country in the world. And then you realize everybody's the same. They're all wonderful people. And most people have pretty bad leaders. And then people judge other religious beings by perhaps their nation's flaws, but without knowing very much about them. So I've always loved the world of interfaith, and I've taught world religions and art history. Art history is really, if you think about it, it's just illustrated world mythology, world religions up until now. But I guess it's modern art is illustrating the mentality of today. And so anyway, that has been a pleasure and an honor to be given something like that to do, just as you've been given that. And the children's series I've been working on with a grant from Templeton, one of the volumes on charity really would explain what we end up doing in a certain sense. I mean, our attitude toward it. In all the faith traditions, we're asked to be humble. But I mean, if I said to you, be humble, how do you just be humble? Well, in this extraordinary work written in the late 1000s, it's pointed out that you and I didn't choose our parents, didn't give ourselves our skills, our place in time and space, our social status, our connections. We actually didn't give ourselves any of these things. So how dare we take credit? And really everything that you are, I am, our qualities, our drives, our interests, everything, all of that, and who we are in the world is on loan. It's just a trust. And so that trust can't help but come through. And when one's really doing one's true work, it's not coming from your egoic story, it's coming from your heart. It's coming from true man, or you can call it innate goodness, or the Buddha nature, or in Hebrew, Adama, or self in Hinduism, Fitra in Arabic, the primordial nature, the Christ nature. All these traditions refer to this presence where we are all one. I was thinking this morning about the other and all the interfaith movements in the world. And I was thinking to what degree I'm still othering everyone, even of other traditions. I've been in my whole life trying to bring them together, reconcile them. You know, I do series on Judaism, spiritual affinities with Islam. I do Prince Rezi of Jordan with Dalai Lama doing Buddhism and Islam, or all the different traditions. And yet, sometimes when I think of someone of an other tradition, I go right into stereotype. And It's very hard to be 100% present, but there is nothing to do with human life except reach that place. That's what human life is for, to quit othering. That wonderful Richard Rohr, he's great, who lives out in Albuquerque now with his Center of Contemplative Action. Neville and I visited him once, and he had a small gathering and there's one thing I took away. He said, you know, when you meet the other, another person, there should be nothing there except love. It's like even having you in my home right now. I'm honoring a human presence that's carrying the divine. It's like we're light bulbs. The bulb can go, but the light is there. And so Richard Rohr said the importance of not othering and to really, when we meet someone, just do it. Of course, you have to remember to do it. And that's what religious practices of different traditions help you to do. But we got on a plane and we had to go to Atlanta to change to get back to Louisville. And I was getting some tea at that crossroads where there's pizza and the worst of fast foods. And there were some people waddling toward the pizzas with baseball caps. And at first I thought, oh, yuck. And then I realized I had othered them, I had judged. And so I caught myself and I opened my eyes and looked at those people with the caps and simply loved them. And all of a sudden, they started glowing. And all I can say is whenever I remember to do this, oddly enough, I do it not so much in my life as I do it in airports, watching people. But you feel great because you're acting out of your real self. And look what happened with Merton on 4th and Chestnut, 4th and Walnut, 4th and Muhammad Ali. He looked at those people around Stewart's and saw them shining as the sun. And everybody is. And somehow all of our traditions, various traditions or practices, should find ways to establish us in true man, as it's called, true self, innate goodness, inner dignity. And I remember once His Holiness the Dalai Lama said at Harvard Medical School, he was there before he was famous, no guards, no nothing. It was the late 80s. And he was sitting at with all the other speakers. And it came his turn, and he said, disease, dis-ease, that's stress. You know, they talk about how much inflammation and stress is really illness. He said, I'm not talking about you got a divorce, you lost your job. Not that. I'm talking about the real stress, that you feel that you are not aligned with your inner, innate heart essence. And honestly, we all feel it. And the difference is where we're acting from. When we are with a person, the other, everything's other, right? Now, for example, most of us identify, it's all misidentification. Most of us identify with our egoic story. I'm Gray Henry, I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, I publish books, blah, blah, right? And therefore, things that are happening, I'm judging through the mentality I've grown up with, my prejudices, the things I like and dislike. So I'm basically judging nearly every situation through a gray package, right? And I'm not acting from my heart. And so I've always been interested, I think, when you're at the Festival of Faiths, I think when we had all those scholars come for the Dalai Lama, the assignment I was asking them was, what practices do you have in your tradition that help you to practice or establish yourself in your sacred core, right? so that you get used to it. It's always there. It's the true self. As Thomas Merton said in this, with his last words before he died, we are already one if we only remembered it, right? And that's it. How do we start remembering that there is no other, that we are all one essence, one glorious light together? And how do we quit misidentifying with the wrong self?
So let's talk about how you came to believe those things. I'm going to use your question. You told me you asked the woman in Saudi yesterday, who is
Who are
Ray?
you really?
Yeah, who are you?
Oh, well, this is interesting. Who am I really? And I think when people are talking together, finding out each other's stories, we could redirect that question to not being so much a narrative as to be able to look back at your life. At my age, maybe people keep journals or they have diaries and write poetry or do drawings over time. But if we really looked at our story and saw everything as teachings for this moment. If I go back to my childhood, my parents weren't divorced, so I'm not psyched out from that, right? I didn't feel popular in high school, a beginning of a problem. And if I really went carefully back and saw, instead of these ups and downs as, oh gosh, ups and downs, but saw them all as teachings, I would have teachings for what? For reaching who I am, the discovery of the true self, which is nobody. I mean, in the end, it's like Emily Dickinson, I'm nobody, who are you? I'm nobody too. But I mean, and recently applies to this also, the Dalai Lama did a book and a film called Joy. And he and Desmond Tutu are tickling each other and being cute. And then the interviewer said to the Dalai Lama, joy, explain joy. And His Holiness said, well, it's not happy, I'm happy. It's satisfaction. Whoa. Contentment with what? With being centered in that place and acting from that place. And then they said to the Dalai Lama, but oh my God, look at your Tibetan people being trashed by the Chinese. How can you be joyful? And he said something which has really helped me recently. He said, in daily life, every moment, reframe every moment, not as a problem, but as an opportunity. Well, an opportunity to do what? To be who we really are, to act from that self which isn't judging others. It's Ram Dass said something kind of interesting. When you go out and see trees outside and some are bent because the wind has been blowing that way for years, you don't think, oh gosh, horrible tree, it's bent. No, it's gone with nature. And we should not judge people any more than we judge a tree, because we are all given. So I would, looking back at my life, who am I really? Who am I discovering I am? And you have to watch yourself. The real self has to watch the lower self. It's quite a process because there are many things I think I should do. I should do Tai Chi. I have the disc, I've got the little recorder, but I don't do it. But I'm really thinking I should be doing it. And then I think I should read certain books. And I buy them, and they sit in piles, and they never get read. And so I'm thinking, am I just a bad person? What's going on here? Why am I so undisciplined? Rather than looking at what I'm trying to do is, when a book comes and I stand at the kitchen counter and read it immediately, I'm saying yes to something. And I think if you look over your life at what you do, not what you think you should be doing, you'll start to see you're being drawn to the true self. For example, if you go back and look at all the books you've ever underlined in your whole life, and you are now my age, old, you would discover you would still underline the same passages. Why? You're saying yes to who you are. So you have to watch. Oh, I like this idea. I'm staying with this idea. When we brought out the Thomas Merton series, when we did Merton and Sufism, we did 9 volumes of his love of the great traditions in his incredible devotion to all of the beautiful universal ideas, and they are universal. If they're true, they're universal. And so I went to the Bellarmine Library. They have his books there. And he didn't own anything. He was a monk, but he had the ones he used, he underlined. So I wrote an essay on the things he had not only underlined, but he put out in the margin like 1 to 5 exclamation marks. So he was saying, yes. And so then I started saying, oh, I see he's recognizing himself. So you can start to recognize yourself in what you love and in the people you love. You see the types you're drawn to. You know, there are many people you think, I should get to know them, I should have them over, I should have dinner. A lot of that is maintaining the outer egoic package. It's about making connections, networking. That may have something to do with your spiritual self, but a lot of the time it's just keeping your economic situation going in some form. But there are people that when the eyes meet, it's Rumi said it, there's a glance. Coleman Barks talks about this, the glance where you meet. There's nothing. That's it. So you start to see, I'm starting to look, when you're just starting out in life, you don't know how it's going to wind up. You don't know if you're going to get married, if you'll have children, if they'll be a wreck, if you ever get a job. You don't even know how you're going to make a living when you're starting out. But if you start following things that really interest you, and something interesting, if you get interested in something, if you keep going into it further and further, the depth opens and there is more and more. You nearly become an expert in something, but you're following something that you're attracted to, and there's a reason for it. It's not just out of control stuff. So it's very important to stay with what you're attracted to because you love it.
Yeah. Can we turn off your phone? Is that okay? It's ringing.
I don't know how.
Oh, here.
Oh, I can turn off the phone, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll make that.
So let's talk about your spiritual journey.
Well, let me just finish this idea.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if you are following something that you love, all young people, you will find that you actually could probably make a living from it later so that your life would always be good. You're not checking in at a factory just for money. I mean, I do what I love. I work 13 hours a day, including weekends, but I'm working with books that are beautiful, with scholars that have deep thoughts, with ideas. I'm attracted to the ideas that I need to reach the state of being that I need to reach. So in that sense, be on alert to the people you really love. Just love their company. What is it you love about them? Usually it's because they're funny, or they're cute, or they're good, or they're truthful, or they're honest. It's rarely about anything material. Okay, so you had another question.
Yeah, so, I know things about you, but I don't know your story, your journey. Tell me about your spiritual journey. How were you raised religiously, and how was it that you became attracted to Islam? And what, just tell me your journey.
Well, the journey began right here. I've been in this house since I was in kindergarten. And the journey began when I was around 15. And some kids were in traffic accidents, maybe from drinking, and they died. And I couldn't believe, it's like if you're sitting with someone right now like you, and then, oh, you were just killed. Like, are you just gone? And, I'm a member of the Episcopal Church, which my father designed. And I love to go to church, and I never miss Sunday school. And their doctrines in all of the great faith traditions, that there is something more than just this state. But even though people were saying they believed in the resurrection of the body and life everlasting, I found people didn't believe that because it was not scientific, not provable. And so I became really curious about what happens to you when you die. And then even someone I was going out with when I was 20 died, a terrible accident. And I decided I would major in the world's religions. I wanted to find out what everyone said about death universally. One of the great books we've done is a compilation of the entire spiritual process from birth to death, in which we show every single idea, whether it's greed, envy, whatever, all what everyone in all the faith traditions have said about that idea, whether it's Plato or Lao Tse or Shakespeare. And then you see that the world comes together on these things. So I started becoming interested, and I was barking up the wrong tree. I was barking up the tree of physical death. Where do you go? What happens after you die? Actually, we don't know, and the real subject is not that. That's not even within anything that our human mind, it's beyond the human categories. But it's the death that's called die before you die, which is key to every single faith tradition. Or I would say even in modern psychology, how do you knock down the ego that's self-interested, self-referential, boasting all the time? People are with their voices all the time. They're putting other people down subtly, raising their eyebrows, trying to be liked in strange ways. So the question is, how do you approach? And that's the part that suffers. When the Buddha speaks of all suffering comes from desire. Yeah, desire. I wish that hadn't happened. Oh, I hope that happens. So constantly on a roller coaster of wanting something else causes suffering. But if you are present, be here now, believe it or not, good old be here now is what's really going on. How do you be present? And you can see this today. How many people are taking meditation, yoga, you name it, because they have a sense that there's nothing to go to on the outside, but the journey really is going to a place where you're finally present and at peace. So I had been barking up the wrong tree, but I wasn't. You are always, if you look back over all the events in your life, even your short life, you can start to see the teachings, not only the teachings in it to get you to that final approach, the final takeoff landing, but also it gives you your life experiences. Also, you can start to notice, who am I going toward? What is the state of being? And mine is just what I've just expressed to you. But for the long time, I misunderstood who I was going for. I thought I was going for somebody who was, acceptable to everybody, well-liked, a proper citizen, all that kind of stuff, which is all good, right? I'm not saying that's wrong, but that's not the final goal. That's not going to be the state you want to be in as you're lying on your final deathbed.
So you lost a boyfriend while you were in college?
Yeah.
And so were you studying this interfaith or religions at that time at Sarah Lawrence? Mm-hmm. And then what happened?
So then, having studied the faith traditions, and I really woke up in the Hindu Vedanta. The Vedanta of Hinduism deals with the underlying metaphysical underpinnings of reality. Everybody's got it. I don't find that Protestants deal with it. The Jews have the Zephyrothic tree. The Catholics have it, particularly the Eastern Church, the essence and the divine energies. The Far Eastern, the 10,001 things. In Islam, the God and the 99 names. All of these things, Hinduism, the God and the deities, all of these things are divine qualities. And reality is made up of them. If you look at an oak tree, it's got majesty, verticality, protection, birds and things. But a daisy doesn't have that. So everything in the manifested universe is made up of divine qualities. And this is important for everything I'm going to tell you. And so once you understand that there's the little self and the real self, and this stuff that I read, from the Hindu Vedanta, I was like 18, 19 when I read it. It's perfectly clear. It's utterly simple and it's universal. And if you don't have something underneath of your faith tradition, you're likely to stop believing in it. And I think that's what's wrong with the kids today who've all let go of all the faith traditions. In England, there are very few little village churches left. It's all shutting down. You can go to Cambridge Divinity. Nobody believes in God because they're not being given metaphysics. They're being given do's and don'ts. If you don't do 10 of those, you're going to hell. Well, nobody wants to get into a thing like that. So I understood this underpinning, but I didn't see, and I, of course, was very interested in the Hindu spiritual tradition. I'm not talking about the many deities that represent the divine manifestations. I'm talking about there was the great Hindu saint Sri Ramana Maharshi, who died in the 40s. And we love the great book called Conversations with Maharshi. And there's a video of it. And that video, you show it in Egypt, people are saying that's the most beautiful thing we've ever seen. An incredible saint who was in the state of oneness. I have been to where he died in Arunachala, not far from Madras. And we ate on leaves. There was the mountain where his cave was. But because he reached the state of oneness of being, people came from all over the world to talk to him. But he didn't answer in duality. He answered from the state of oneness. That was like a very key factor in my life. The image of this great saintly being. I wasn't raised with saints in the Christian world. We also thought, Catholics have got them, but as Anglicans, I didn't think we did. St. Francis, Mother Teresa, that kind of thing, very limited, right? But saints and sanctification is people say, oh, saints. No, a saint is the person who I discussed from the beginning, who has no left, the ego is now gone. They are simply present in the divine oneness of being where there is no other. That's what a saint is. And I'm sure there are plenty around that we don't even know who they are. An old grandmother who reached the peace and calm of non-judgmentalness and loving everyone around her with no putting them down. So that's the state we're after, and that's the process of sanctification. So I realized that's the process I wanted. Because I was drawn to these things, you see. I thought, wow, and that was the kind of thing I wanted to read and the kind of people I wanted to be around. And then after Sarah Lawrence, I went into filmmaking and joined a film studio. It was made documentaries, and it was basically people of wisdom who knew these different traditions. And every night we go to Chinatown and discuss Buddhist sutras or all of the great traditions. And then we ended up, of course, the 60s hit, and it wasn't long before we made all of Timothy Leary films and did the Beans with Allen Ginsberg and all the rest of them. It was a lot of fun, It was really great fun. And all those people at the beginning of the psychedelic movement were totally conscious beings. And the whole psychedelic thing originally was people wanting to get a taste of something outside of all their categories, a place where they experienced oneness of spirit. And of course, then it just crashed and became what it did. But it didn't start out that way. And I realized today there's this Michael Pollan, who's all these books on using all these psychedelics now for your mental health and to have a taste of oneness of being when you're just trapped in multiplicity. But anyway, that's a side issue. But then in that period, reading the different spiritual traditions, my husband and I started reading about some of the Sufi saints of North Africa. And he had grown up a Catholic and loved St. Francis of Assisi and wanted to be like him. Well, how are you going to be like St. Francis of Assisi? Right? How? Right? You can love him, and who doesn't? Okay, so there he is, talking to the birds and the whole thing, being perfect, empty. How do you get to be like that? Yeah, what do you do? You're from Louisville, Kentucky. Where do you go to start to go toward that? Well, it turns out you can read all the books you like about St. Francis or any of the great saints, right, of any tradition, you know. Yeah, think of some of the great Hindu saints, the Buddhist saints. I mean, wow, you read about them. But it's amazing what reading won't do for you. Reading, you read about them, but it's actually their presence, which is the teacher. And it used to be that in all the religious traditions, if you felt the aptitude and you wanted to go for the full sanctification of the soul, it's basically purgatory while you're alive, getting rid of everything that's tainted so that you're finally present. But in most traditions, if you want to go the full way, you would become a monk or a nun. You know, there are Buddhist monks and nuns, and then regular Buddhists, Hindu nuns, and finally there is the Hindu tradition of taking sannyas, and that is when even you've gone beyond being a priest type, you attend your own funeral, you put on a loincloth, you take a begging bowl, and you go out to finally empty yourself of everything. That's the final stage of approaching liberation from the egoic self. And then, I mean, of course, Christians, we have plenty of nuns and monks that we know, very lovely. And then in Islam, it's a little different, that when you make the decision in the Islamic world that you want to go for the sanctified state consciously, you don't become celibate. You stay married, you stay running your company, but you go ahead and you start taking instructions as a disciple of a saint. Well, in the Islamic world, in every town and village, they're still living saints. And you can go and sit at their feet and experience what you want to be. You can see, oh, I want to be like that. And maybe you could get it from your grandmother here in Louisville. Yeah, there are plenty of, maybe there's a father who's absolutely, think of the people we maybe don't know who are empty and they serve. So it's like when we brought out the book with the Dalai Lama on Islam and Buddhism, I sat with him in Bloomington and I thought, oh gosh, what am I going to say to him? He's holding up the book, right? We have speakers. And I said, Your Holiness, Buddhism is based on emptiness and mindfulness, being empty of all and remembering who you really are. And Islam and Sufism is based on faqr, which is holy poverty and humility, and dhikr, which is remembering the true state. The Dalai Lama, the way he does. So it's the same thing. All traditions are based on that. It is every single tradition. Let's look at the Christian version. Death, resurrection, eternal life. Death of what? Death of your egoic. Resurrection is reforming on in the Christ nature or the Buddha nature or whatever nature. And then eternal life. And then there's nothing. It's the return to the divine source, to God, without, it's like you have a cup, and in it is some stuff that has to be emptied out, right? So you have to die off the gook inside and reform the interior of your being on perfect man. And those are represented by the sages and saints. Not prophet is too high. You don't have to go that far. But on those people who serve others in humility and love. And it sounds so trite, you hear it your whole life, but actually it's the truth, and that's what's really going on. So then we decided the hippie thing, we were in the middle of fighting the people throwing napalm in Vietnam. It was a turbulent time, the end of the 60s. And so we got on a freighter and shipped out to Morocco in 1968 and arrived in Tangiers. We were with 8 people on a freighter, and we'd never seen anything like it in our life. Like, we're looking at the traditional life, the life of the Middle Ages of Christianity, with people, doing their 5 prayers a day like Christians used to do. Think of the paintings of Malay. The peasants would stop all day long at the different periods of the field. Here are people who are still doing that, right? Where else is it being done? Oh, go out to Gethsemane. The monks are doing it. But why weren't people in my church doing that? Why was it just kneeling by your bed at night or on Sundays? So here was a tradition that was still praying, right? Here was a tradition that, like, even let's take Lent. Oh, I used to give up chocolate, sort of a 2 deal. I've given up something and maybe I'll lose weight. Check out Ramadan. Everyone from dawn to dusk, no food, no water, even in summer. Whoa, that's hard to do, right? I can't imagine someone being able to do something like that. And yet, that's what Lent must have been originally. So what we're looking at with the Islamic tradition is it's 600 years younger. So they are taking the principles of even their charity, their tithing is not just giving 10% in an envelope at church. It's like everyone assesses themselves, even women, on their jewelry, how much they have to give. People sit around in the evening not talking about a football match, but am I assessing myself enough for what I've got? And everyone gives, so that if you go to Mobil Oil and say, when you go to assess yourself 2.5% of it, would you think of our charity? So this huge amount of money, everybody, even the poor people, it all gets reactivated and back in circulation. So it's a whole, and it's called zakat, and zakat means like pruning. If you cut a bush, it grows more. It's also a form of purification. So we walked into the Middle Ages. And how interesting to see. And then people, if you wanted to find a saint, you could go to this village or that place, and you go, and there's someone sitting, sitting maybe with a long white beard, maybe not, and women ones too. It's not just men. So these are people who are present, and they are empty, and people go to them, and they sit in their company, and they start observing. Oh, that's the way to be. It's not in a book, but that's it. And it's not only the being, but there is the presence, which is the light. And that's what we all want to be. We all want to be like this.
Was there someone in particular that you followed there or studied with?
No, not at that point. But in Morocco, we visited many and saw, this is the deal. And they're different, just as in, let's say, the Catholicism, there are the Franciscans and there are the Benedictines. They're different orders or brotherhoods. Probably in Hinduism too, of course. In Buddhism, certainly. Tibetan Buddhism has the Galupas. So in the Islamic tradition, it's also different lineages from different saints. But as you discover, because we as kids and teenagers, we went and frequented them all, and they were all the same. Different angles, different maybe, but it was the same thing. And it was based, the practices are based on something like Holy Communion. One of the books, one of the few things I've written, was a video that was turned into a book, is called The Universal Use of the Rosary. And it interested me everywhere I went in the world, people use the rosary. Everybody except the Protestants again, right? So I was trying to figure out how to explain rosaries to my mother at one point, and I realized that it's again that process: death, emptying, reforming, and union. Death, resurrection, eternal life. It's the getting rid of something and reforming on the pure, and then the return to the one. So I was thinking about Holy Communion, and you don't go up to the altar if you're sort of full of hate and anger, but we say, Lord, have mercy upon me, Christ, have mercy upon me. Empty out. And then you go up to the altar and kneel, and you receive into that emptiness the bread and the wine, which I actually believe in transubstantiation. I don't believe it's symbolic, but that's the way I am. That's my kind of angle on things. You put into that the Christ nature, and suddenly, for that moment, you're kneeling there, you have regained who you really are. You're practicing who you really are with Holy Communion. Isn't it interesting the Catholics do it they go to Mass all the time. And then at that moment, if you look at some of the paintings in the Vatican with the altar, the chalice, the medium, the dove of the Holy Spirit, and the communion of saints, you, at that moment of regaining your pure nature, you return to the one. There is no death. That return. That actually, if you do that consciously when you're doing Holy Communion, you can't imagine what that's like, right? But that's going on in every tradition. And they're all in the rosary being used. Let's say in the Islamic rosary, there are 99 beads, and the first round, or the first 33, they say the same thing. Instead of Lord, have mercy upon me, Christ, they say, forgive me, God. Forgive me for my neglect, for my ignorance, and then the second round is reforming on perfect man, regaining the true self. And the last round, which is La ilaha illallah, there is no reality except the reality. That's it. The oneness of being, which underlies the whole metaphysical thing of everything, which we can't understand we can't understand it with our minds, which deal with duality and category, but the heart can understand it. So this is called the prayer of the heart. It activates the heart. In the Eastern tradition and Eastern Orthodox, it's the Jesus prayer. Lord, have mercy upon me. Christ, have mercy upon me. If I could teach only one book in world religions, I would teach The Way of the Pilgrim, a little anonymous pilgrim who sets out in Russia, carrying his little knapsack. And his trust is the main thing. So, there's so much to say because there's so many things that tie into this.
When did you go to Egypt? Was that from Morocco or at a different time of your life?
No, Morocco, we got a car. We bought a little Citroën van, and we set off. First, we went in Morocco all the way down the Drah Valley. We lived with Bedouins who had come to collect their dates from Timbuktu, lived in their tents with the, beautiful, humble people. Everywhere we went, the hospitality, we don't have that here, We'd never seen hospitality before. You go and we reached Algeria and our car broke in the desert and the mechanic said, look, there's no place for you to stay. You all will stay with us. They made us sleep in their only bed. So I had never experienced Christianity before. Yeah, what we're told. If you walk around our city, can you tell the people are practicing Christianity? What's it look like? You go to the Islamic world, you see what Christianity looks like in action. So it was like, whoa, I'm finally seeing my own tradition awake, because I don't see it in a day-to-day experience with people here. But in the Islamic world, every other phrase they say is praise the Lord. And they say it for good and bad because they so trust that when a trial comes, even if they can't see that God has something for them, they know it in their hearts, but they're saying it all the time. If they praise somebody's something, they say a little prayer so they don't envy it, So there's something, it's continuous, the whole thing. So you're in a world where people are in the constant remembrance of trusting God, and they're always counseling each other. If someone is upset, they have a beautiful phrase to say from Scripture or something like this. So, and of course, just as Christians are supposed to be imitating Jesus, how he would do everything at every moment. It's the same with the Muslims and the Buddhists. These are, of course, the Prophet Muhammad is not considered to be anything more than a man. He just had it all together with no ego. And a friend of mine told me a life-changing story. She's a professor, and her daughter was born with spina bifida, and the marriage fell apart, and the daughter is put in a kind of school. And this friend of mine said, several times a week, the school calls, and she's a teacher, and says to me, now your daughter has had a seizure and she's peed on herself, come get her. And my friend said, every time the phone rings, I'm thinking, oh no, not again. Would Jesus ever have thought that? The person we're trying to imitate? No, he would say, let me help her up. Let me go. There would never even be the thought, it's inconvenient. Who's being inconvenient? Our egoic narrative packaging. We are essences. It's not inconvenient. It's the heart. And that is what all of us, whoever is listening to this interview, has to realize. You've got to get from, oh, it's inconvenient, to, I'm there for you at this moment. And those are the two different packages that we can act out of.
So when did you go to Egypt, and what happened? How long were you there?
Well, we were driving across North Africa, and I became pregnant. And then we reached Libya, which had a king with a beard, that when he moved from town to town, they would say, the king is coming, the king is coming. This is before Gaddafi destroyed. The Libyans are wonderful. So we reached a small town north of where that terrible flood just took away the people of Derna. We were up in the mountains above Cyrene in Beta. And so I delivered my daughter, Bedouins with tattoos. I didn't even speak English. Luckily, I just sat on a table in gravity. And so it was beautiful to be with traditional people. The women just sit around under a fig tree, everybody nursing their babies. I didn't speak any Arabic. And we met people, students from all over the world who were in this town studying, people from, Bosnia and Bangladesh and Nigeria. The Filipinos became our big pals. I'm totally into Filipino culture, cooking Filipino. And then later, we finally reached Egypt with a 2-month-old baby. And it was just as the 67 war with Israel was ending, so it was still bombs continued on a long time in Egypt. But my grandfather had been in Egypt for 27 years, from 25 to 52. He was a Rhodes Scholar to Oxford, where he became a judge and where he taught law. And my father and uncles and everybody grew up in England. My children went to the same schools as my grandchildren that my father did. And so once at Buckingham Palace, the American ambassador said, Judge Henry, Europe, basically, each country is sending out 2 judges to be part of the Napoleonic courts of Egypt. Well, what was it really? Is that the Suez Canal was being put together, and the Europeans, we always want to grab people's stuff, so I'm sure they didn't want, if there was a dispute, to be judged under Egyptian law, which was Napoleonic. So Pops and Gammy lived in Alexandria for 27 years, right through the Second World War. And my grandmother read out loud to the blinded soldiers of Montgomery in the other room. I mean, even these lamps are from their house, and furniture in the other room, and, all that brass is all from their house in Egypt. And so I grew up, when I was a little baby, all the letters that came to this house all had the stamps of King Fouad or King Farouk. And so then in 1952, it went from being a kingdom to a socialist republic. Gamal Abdel Nasser took over and threw out all the foreigners. It was terrible because he didn't care about culture, and the Russians came in. I cannot tell you, the libraries, all the great things established by the royal people were just trashed, Anyway, my grandfather, of course, all the foreigners were asked to leave. So my grandfather went to Baton Rouge. Why? America is on Anglo-Saxon law, except for one state, Louisiana. It's on French law. So my grandfather went there and started putting the Napoleonic Code into English and editing it for the modern world. And so finally, they came here and died here when I was in my 20s. So then we reached Egypt, and we had a connection. One of the American judges, Judge Brinton from Philadelphia, he for some reason stayed on, and we met all the wonderful people from all over the world living in Egypt. And every country, it's not like meeting the people that go to Paris to be in the embassy. The people who come to Egypt, the Germans are all interested in archaeology, all the people from India and agriculture. So it was the most fabulous life, Cairo. It's London, Paris, horrible. Egypt, fun. Everybody from all over the world are there, and you have layers of civilization, not just the Pharaonic and the early Christian. There's the Persian period, the Greeks, the Romans. You can't ever see Egypt, So we arrived there with a 2-month-old baby, virtually penniless. And my husband got a job with, first he taught filmmaking, film direction at Cairo University, and Spanish at another university. We needed money. And I taught English and art, because I didn't speak Arabic, at a little Egyptian school. But basically what we were learning from being among the Egyptians were manners. The people, they always put the other person first. If you come to their house and they've just baked fresh chocolate chip cookies, they don't save it and give you the store-bought. Their first reaction, it's like the girl saying, is, my God, I've just made cookies, eat them all. And they're not faking it. They mean it because they are that way. And why are they that way? Why are they more generous than we are? When we moved to England, it was like going to the land of the barbarians from civilization. And everyone looks and thinks the Islamic world, barbarians. It's just the media's done it to everybody, but it's not the way it is.
And how many years were you in Egypt?
10.
Wow.
10. How can you leave it? It's fun. So then my husband, Nasser, died, and Sadat let the West in, including NBC television. So my husband shot the films. He worked for the bureau chief. And I mean, he even was lying on his stomach on a helicopter filming the opening of the Suez Canal. And but I mean, then you see what's going on with the media. Then you discover you've like sold your soul to the devil. It's all changed, it's all fixed, it's all altered. America is given news that's been fixed for our audience. CNN today in Egypt and England is not what we're being fed. So you start seeing this other scary dimension with news. But on the other hand, you're there in a country with fabulous, hilarious people. And there in Egypt at that time in the 70s were 3 major Islamic saints. I mean, like you've never seen anything like it. And who did we find in Egypt? Kids like us. The Japanese, the Italian, the French kids, the British, kids, zillions of Jews, kids from all over the world who were trying to find presences of how to be, And the Islamic ones are more accessible. I mean, you can go and sit with a Buddhist saint or Hindu, but being Abrahamic, they're referring to whole other systems of metaphysics. And I mean, I was always told when I was in Tibet, these are the deities. Like, I don't believe in deities, even if they're divine principles. I don't like the vocabulary. Whereas if the Judeo-Christian Islamic, it's all one Abrahamic thing. All the references are the same, So everything is the same. Yeah. You don't have to move out. It's the same deal. So then you have people, all the Jewish kids were becoming either Buddhists or Sufis. And those kids that came in those days are some of the major figures, in Islamic studies and so on. But
Did you know Abdullah Schleifer from Tangiers or from Cairo?
from Cairo.
Okay.
He was the bureau chief.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he came from Jerusalem to be the bureau chief.
So I think you know, he's in this project. I interviewed
Yeah.
him 20 years ago.
You know, I mean, we see him every single day in Cairo.
That's great.
Yeah.
So
We had
what about
Chris
your
with him.
relationship with Islam and Sufism? Did you?
Well, my interest in, I used to say my interest in Islam was Sufism, but it's the same thing. It's a spiritual practices. I mean, which lead you to practice your true sacred essence in your heart, and it's a system that actually produces people that are different. You know, I mean, it's really what Christianity is. It's really what Judaism and all of them. But it was living, you know, so that all of the kids, all of us there, were particularly interested in this. And that led us, after living in Egypt for 10 years. And then my husband worked making films around the world on Islam. We took the children to meet the Muslims in Taipei and Kyoto and Jakarta and all over the world, but it's all just. I mean, we are. Universalist. I love all the traditions. To me, they're all beautiful. There's even no difference. But it's just, I think I woke up to what my Christian heritage was in its living form. You know, in the Middle East, or anyway. So then, in 1979, we realized that we were, I don't want to say tired of living in the Middle East, but the children needed to be educated, and we moved to Cambridge, England, and we decided to go into publishing world spirituality. So we opened up Quinta Essentia. This is deep symbolism in art history and art, and the Islamic Text Society. We decided to have the great Sufi classics of the world translated by great scholars and beautifully produced. And so we ended up with a little small building in Cambridge, England. And I did a MA in Education and Curriculum Development and started a doctorate in divinity at Canterbury on the Cherubim. And my children grew up in England, and my son went to Cambridge and finally did international law, but he took a year off and lived in India. And so they're still there. My children have never moved to America. My daughters never lived here, but my granddaughter, Sophia Maria, just graduated from Oxford in Latin and Greek. So it's kind of wide-reaching, but we're very comfortable all over the world. And they were, I think what we were given, Fons Vitae. Then I came back to Louisville in 1989. So my parents, who had built this house, my father was an architect. He did the public library downtown and WAS and WAVE and universities and stuff. He had had his legs amputated from bad circulation, and mother was in a walker. So I decided it was enough. The children were in their lives, and I needed to come home. And so I came home to be with them, and I got a job at Bellarmine doing academic development, and then I was told to do something about the Merton Center, which led me to saying to Jay McGowan, I'm going to bring the Dalai Lama here, and going to Tibet that summer. And then I worked doing the Year of Tibet out of Bellarmine. And then after my parents died, my father, I went to work in the refugee camps in Bosnia, because I had met the young kid we met in Libya. He became the prime minister of Bosnia, and I saw him on TV through a State Department. So then that's the wake-up call of working like the Gaza scene, where you're holding people with all of this going on. And I had post-traumatic stress from that afterward, and I did nothing. But I was able to see what they needed in terms of materials and education, and raise funds and publish and do a lot of stuff. And then I started Fons Vitae afterward, because of, again, being who I am. it's good to go home to your people and bring what you've learned. And what I learned and what I'm transmitting is what I've been saying, is that it's the universality of truth in all traditions, the essential nature of what we must be to be fully human. Even if you're not going to be part of a religious tradition, one has innate goodness, one has primordial nature. And I think what worries me most about young people today is they've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. They've gotten rid of all their traditions. They don't believe in any of it, but they don't realize that those are support systems for real self-realization.
What's your concept of God today?
It's the ground of all being.
Do you feel like you rely upon God?
I cannot imagine how one could live the difficult lives we live without that. Because it gets...
Do you remember when that light turned on for you?
Yeah, I do. You're always have faith, trust, and hope. Trust God. Everyone's saying trust God. In Arabic, they say tawakkalna ala Allah. We put our trust in God. You hear it all the time, right? But you don't know how to do that. You know you should trust God, that when you get the bad news, that there's a level of it that, we are like ants. We can't see what's going on top of the tree. We can't see the divine. Well, when we got totally into Tibet, and they have that knot, that is the interconnectedness of all beings with wisdom and compassion. You can say that 1,000 times, but do you really believe it? And so part of the process of life is, and it's a great thing, my mentor in England, Martin Lings, the curator of all the Oriental manuscripts of the British Museum, and a saint. There was no one there. And that's why he was loved by everyone, Prince Charles, because he was a great Shakespearean scholar, and there wasn't an ego there. So in England, there was this. And when those people speak to you, they don't speak to your story. They speak to your heart. And they speak up to you. And that causes you to rise and be in your heart. And that's what we should all be doing for each other. How dare we do anything less for one another? And we're all misaddressing one another. We should be able, it's like, goodbye is really God be with you. And there was the great Saint Seraphim of Seraph, my favorite saint. And he was in the taiga forest, and he carried stones to remind him that he was praying for the weight of all the people of the world and their suffering. And when finally a man, Motovilov, went to see him, this book was called The Flame in the Snow. He was so luminous, because there was no one there, that Motovilov said, I could see lips moving, but there was the rays of the sun. I couldn't see him. And he said, what he said to me, he didn't say, hello, sir. He said, your godliness. Why don't we say that when we meet the other? It's more than namaste. And in Arabic, when you say sir or madame, you say hadritik. Hadra is the presence of God. Oh, that's this, sorry. Hadra is the presence of God, is yours. So you're saying in Arabic, when you say sir, you're saying your presence of God. That's what's really going on, and everybody's missing it.
Do you feel like was there an event where you realized this for the first time?
It's been coming on gradually, but then the trust is the trick. So you hear your whole life that that we can trust God. Something bad happens, it's the will of God. But what Martin Lings said to me once, he said, life is a gradual demonstration. And what happens over enough times, a thing gets demonstrated to you, you finally know it's true. You finally know. And I've had so many things in my life which couldn't have happened without divine providence.
What was the first one?
Well, one of the most memorable ones is I was here in Louisville, and I was going to go to Egypt for Christmas, out to take some grandchildren some presents and stuff. And my husband took me to out to Stanford Field. Is that what it's called? And I was all these hand luggage packages, and I was in line, and the flight was going to go Louisville, Cincinnati, Cincinnati to JFK, and then the flight to Egypt. And I was standing in line. There were a couple of people from New York right in front of me, and I could hear this. The check-in person said, "Well, sorry to tell you, but the flight from Louisville to Cincinnati has been canceled." And they said, "Well, we don't care. You route us anyway to get us to New York." She said, "Well, actually, there is no way I can do that tonight." And they said, "Well, we're New Yorkers. We're just down for the day. We don't even have toothbrushes." They said, "Well, now this Cincinnati, is that far away?" She said, "Do we have time to drive and make that flight?" She said, "Well, actually, you do." So they turned to me and they said, "Are you doing this?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "We are New Yorkers. We don't drive. We will rent a car if you drive it, right?" And I thought, all right, because it's sort of anticlimactic to go back home and I can do the same flight tomorrow. So we got in the car and we got out to where 71 goes out, and I saw 90 miles to Cincinnati, and the flight was leaving in 2 hours. And I'm not that mathematical, but I figured if I don't drive 90 miles an hour and there's not a half an hour at the other end, there's no chance. So the people are texting in the back seat, and I calmly put the pedal up to 90, very calmly. And I don't drive like that, but I had an unusual calm, and I thought if I get picked up, well, I'll pay the fine. Screeched into the airport. They jumped out and ran for it. I gave $20 to the guy and said, "Return the car," which you don't do, and rushed in with my stuff because I had to check in, and I got to the check-in counter. And the lady said, "I'm sorry, but it's too late for you to make this flight." So I said, "Oh, but I have to." I didn't have to. So then I let Neville know, well, I'm going to do I'm here. I'll just get a hold. Tomorrow I'll take the same flight. It'll go ahead. It's all fine. Then she said, "Oh, miss, actually, that flight leaving for New York was delayed, so we can put you on it, and we can still get your bags transferred to Egypt." So I got on, and there was that couple that had abandoned me. And they said, "Look, we're sorry. When we get to New York, JFK is a huge circle, terminals all the way around. We have a limo, and we'll take you to your terminal," which they did. I got out with my hand luggage, and it was dark, my terminal, but I know where the gate is, So I started running the kind of running where it's about to crack your lungs, it's burning. But I ran as fast as I could, and I got to where the little check-in thing is. There was no one there, and I went down the chute to the plane, and at the bottom, they just pull the wheelchairs, and they're trying to pull the door shut. And I said, "I'm on that flight." And they said, "Actually, you can't get on." I said, "Yeah, but my baggage is on there." It had made it. So they let me on, and I flew, and I was sitting with my daughter the next afternoon, and Neville called me. He'd been to church that morning, and they said, "Didn't Gray fly today," or whenever it was, to Egypt? And Neville said, "Yes." They said, "Oh, well, that flight, the Egypt Air, went into the water." The flight I would have taken the next day. So, in other words, if I hadn't driven 90 miles an hour, if that flight hadn't been delayed, if they didn't have a limousine, and I hadn't run to the nth, 2 seconds later, I would be dead. So I was drawn to that. I didn't know why I was driving like that. I didn't know why I was running like that. I was running to save my life because it wasn't my time. I mean, Rumi has a great story. There are two men sitting at a cafe in Damascus, and one, let's say me, I look over your head and I say, "Oh my God, there's the angel of death." So I say, "Excuse me?" And I say to Solomon, "Transport me on a magic carpet." So in 1 second, I'm in Samarkand, right? At that moment, the angel of death comes up to you and says, "Wasn't that Gray sitting here with you?" And you say, "Yeah." And the angel of death said, "Funny to see her here in Damascus. I have her on my list for Samarkand tonight. So you can't run away. It's fixed. And there are all these stories which are metaphors for that. But that very thing I just told you, that has happened to me over and over again. And one day you realize, I get it. And then you realize when something bad happens, why do all the Muslims say, praise the Lord? Because, praise the Lord, my child is now dead. Because it could be that in God and his wisdom is sparing the child from something. We don't know this, but when that kind of trust, now I have it. And when something horrible happens and I'm really upset, I start praising God from that moment. I don't want to wait till I've discovered, oh, this is what it was for. It's like,
Do you recall a time doubting your faith? Like a time where...
Oh, I think lots. I mean, sometimes you just wonder, are these just a bunch of doctrines, that we're being fed? But then, when I teach art history to a bunch of kids that don't believe in anything, and they see the beauty of Borobudur or Chartres Cathedral, and does beauty come from a lie? And then you can say, isn't it interesting that the people, that the Shakespeares, the Tolstoys, everything you're taught in school is great? Isn't it interesting then all of them believe this stuff? Better take a chance with it,
I like asking people, what are they most grateful for?
Well, to be honest, this morning I was grateful for movement. Because in '88, I was paralyzed. I was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig, ALS, but it turned out to be Guillain-Barré, which knocks out your muscle and nerve system with great pain. And I was in England, and I made it to here. And I never expected to move again. I couldn't chew, and I could suck. I sucked Kroger's, custard milk or something, and they got me back to England and gave up on me. My children were in school there. And so I couldn't, the worst part of it is not to be able to shift position in bed, to never be able to scratch. And and I became conscious of other people who were moving and talking and caring, and people getting angry over things. It's like, if they had any idea, they're moving without pain. And when it finally went, I was giving a lecture because I'm a lecturer, and the subject was how illness and suffering are actually blessings, because they are an opening for purification. And what we've been talking about today completely is the purification of this tainted packaging, right? And when I was doing this talk on this subject, because I could talk even though I couldn't do anything like chew, I could only move my eyes like this, I couldn't turn my head. I was in a wheelchair. And I realized that here I was like a stick in a river going by. And I never complained about this illness, because you're taught, don't complain. This is what's been given to you. But I never praised God for it. I never loved it. And I was like this, and I was in the middle of the talk, and I suddenly realized, I thought of all those people in the Islamic world, when they get the news, your baby is dead, your leg is going to be taken off, and they praise God. And I just thought, they were being given opportunities to purify. And I've been given, for me, the biggest one, because I'm very active, I move a lot, I'm back to back, I never sit down, and everything was taken from me. All my energy was gone, which I must be addicted to. All my movement was gone. My whole life was gone, right? It was like being Job, but not as bad, because I didn't have boils and I didn't have all my family dead. But it was like that. And all of a sudden, I thought to myself, God honored me. He thought I was up to this level of a trial of purification. And at that moment, I loved his will, and the fingers started to move. Mm. They started to come undone. And it means that when we get bad news, instead of being upset, we don't know what it's about. We think we do, but we don't. You have to flow and love his will in you. And that's what you're seeing the Palestinians doing right now in Gaza. That's why it's unreal. So before I reached that stage, and I remember as it was coming undone, I was back in Cambridge. Sometimes at night I'd feel it coming back, and I'd think, oh no. And then I realized, don't think, oh no. Think, oh yes. And when you would flow with what you've been given, you flow with it, you know? You're not like this. When the paralysis hit totally, I was upstairs in my childhood bedroom before being taken back to England. And that night when it happened, I was lying in the bedroom upstairs, and moonlight was coming through the branches all over the bed. And I entitled the article that I wrote about this called, Even at Night, the Sun is There. Even in death, life is there. And I was looking at that, and all of a sudden, the body went so rigid, I was like a log, and I felt something lifting up out of me. And I looked back and I thought, this is unbelievable. My head is on the pillow, and I'm thinking. And I looked out in the hallway and I thought, thank God I'm not in a hospital, right? It'd be horrible. And then I clunked back. I sort of made my peace with death. And there I was, paralyzed until the morning when my parents found me and the whole process began. But during that night, I didn't know whether I was going to live. But I thought, if I end up in a wheelchair, like people won't come and talk to me, they'll be afraid at a party of getting stuck and not being able to get away. Like, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? All right? And then I realized, no, I thought about people I really admired, my mentors spiritually. They didn't do anything. They were. And I thought of this woman in Egypt, Dr. Zahira Abdin, a great Egyptian, aristocrat, doctor, gave her life from 5 a.m. till midnight out, started hospitals all over the world, even in Russia. And she was always available for anyone, even a waif in the street. And she never spoke badly about anyone. And she was like luminous. And what did I love about her? Not that she was a doctor. I loved her state of being. So I thought, if she did that much for me, what I can do with the rest of my life in my wheelchair, if I live, is try to be like that. Because then you're doing more than you're ever doing if you're like serving sandwiches somewhere. Not that that isn't important. You have to do that too. She was a doctor, after all, right?
What's your greatest wish?
Oh, to be like her. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that was a big wake-up call right there. I saw again. And see, the problem is that we keep having these experiences, and then we still lead waste of life. I remember once I pulled out on a highway in England, the M11, off a B road. And because I'd just come from America, I looked the wrong direction. And I pressed on the pedal and I shot out, and I realized I'm dead. And I had my last thought, and I know what it is. And then when I looked up the highway the right way and there were no cars coming, I fell over the steering wheel and sobbed because my last thought was, I should have given everything. And I realized, even knowing my last thought, I'm still keeping for myself. So you can see, these things are all teachings, every one of these events that have happened. Even just the lady next door in Cairo, blind, living in a mud hut, crawling, feeling to see if her plants needed watering. And then my college here in America asked me to send donations for their new gym. Are you kidding, man? Give to the people who need it. So,
Do you have a message?
I think I've said the message. The message is try to remember to meet every person you meet. Try to remember, practice a few times till it becomes second nature, to let the heart consider, right? Even before you speak. Let the heart be in front of the tongue. The tongue will slip and say anything. Let the heart really speak to that person, like who's come into your space. You have a divine presence in front of you. And if you treat them like that, it'll remind them of who they are.
Yeah. Amen.